This is the Running Channel podcast with me, Andy Baddeley, Rick Kelsey over there, pressing buttons in the corner, making himself useful. And thankfully, we've got rid of Sarah Hartley this week replaced her, upgraded her with Mo from the Running Channel, who's fresh off the back of running at the Copenhagen half marathon, which is what we're going to talk about this episode, all about running a faster half marathon, or maybe your first ever half marathon.
So glad to see the back of her.
We love her, really. And she will be back next week. But welcome, Mo.
I don't want her back.
Mo's sneaking in. He's taking her place.
Well, new week, new cast. Here we are. This all looks cozy. How's the chair?
Oh, the chair's fantastic.
So we're going to get into your sub 80-minute half marathon, May, shortly. But, I mean, first off, Andy, how's your week been running was?
Good, actually. So, I mean, I've been getting a fair bit of support on Strava when I've been posting actual training, which I have been doing now for a substantial amount of time, really building up to this marathon, where people are saying stuff like, oh, they won't be able to make fun of you on the podcast anymore. I mean, you absolutely will.
You will.
Yeah, we'll find a way.
Yeah, that's not going to change anything. But yeah, I did my longest run to date at the weekend. So 14 miles, nearly 23K, which was a revelation. That's my longest run in years and years.
I'm really impressed by your commitment, you know.
Thanks.
So, because we were out filming at the New Forest Half Marathon last week, after we all finished the 10K race, it was absolutely belting it down.
Yes,
and
it was
Andy,
horrible, wasn't it?
even despite being there as, helping out, shall we put it, decided to get out there and do another 10K at the end.
Yes, that was the week before.
Commitment.
Yes, that was my first foray over 20K. Yeah, I did just over 20K, 2 lots of 10K in the beautiful New Forest, so I wasn't complaining. But yeah, I've done that. I did an intervals session, which weirdly I've just been really enjoying the challenge. I much prefer the intervals though. Like, the time seems to pass much more quickly. My mentality is really focused on like, I'm going to hit these paces, and I've really enjoyed that challenge, and I've got a bit of a glow and excitement about this marathon madness that I never thought I would be motivated for.
Are you feel like you're on target?
Yeah, I mean, still the distance that worries me rather than the pace necessarily. So just getting around, and I'm getting various aches and pains when I'm running. Different things hurt all of the time, but hopefully nothing major. So yeah, I'm feeling comfortable with my fitness and the paces, but just a little bit worried about the distance still. I still find it a little bit kind of intimidating.
So when are you going to get up to, the 20-mile mark?
I reckon that's in about 4 weeks or so. I've got an extra run in this week, so from going from 3 to 4 runs, but my longest run is shorter this week to kind of recover from the build-up over the last few weeks. And then I'll go again the week after, which will be a 16-mile run. So frustratingly, I've been working in both Ks and miles, which so we're like, go and do a 10-mile run at 4-minute something K pace, which is a stupid way of thinking about it.
I mean, for someone who's ran in 2 Olympic Games, I mean, that just seems stupid.
Yeah, but it keeps me thinking whilst I'm running, thinking about the different things. But generally, I've moved from when I was competing as a pro to doing everything in miles to then doing them in Ks because it sounds further and it sounds faster. So,
well, I tell you what, I was only thinking in kilometres when I was doing my first 10K last week.
Here we go. So really,
I was only thinking in absolutely. So New Forest, there's a video that's actually just come out about it. So the first 10K back, Andy, what were the conditions like?
So before I tell you the conditions, just like to I know we make fun of each other on this podcast. This is one of my proudest, sort of most heartfelt emotional moments on the channel, was seeing you at this race, back racing again. Anyone that listens to the podcast know Rick's been through multiple surgeries. It's like this, and has had a very different background in running to me. So but we've been friends for a long time, and being there and experiencing that with you was amazing. But yes, we got there, hottest weekend of the year, weirdly, in September. And then also, we're just about to start running, and it started raining pretty hard. So it couldn't have been a weirder kind of build-up.
It was unbelievable. The weather in London was clear blue skies, 34 degrees. And, 100 miles south on the south coast, it was just pelting it down the whole race. And, it's all about, obviously, getting back into running and doing a race again. You're getting used to those run conditions and what it's like to be back in a race amongst people. The hustle and the bustle, feeling your way at the start, getting across the start line, setting yourself up, food, fueling. But then all of a sudden, you're dealing with something that you really didn't expect to be dealing with as well, which was essentially the weather and the courses. We build this up, but it honestly is stunning. The New Forest.
The New Forest is my favorite place.
You love it. You love going on holiday.
I rave about this all the time.
You just go and camp there on a Tuesday night. It is absolutely amazing. I found it really hard though, guys. Really,
because of the rain.
I found the whole race environment condition just because I was just so mentally out of that state. I found it really hard. Just kind of, I was trying to pace myself, just stick mile after kilometer after kilometer just to get through, but just. The in the legs to get over the 10K, I found it really tough, but absolutely exhilarating.
So how did it feel to finish? So a bit of a spoiler. Obviously, Rick did finish this 10K. That's why I was so emotional. There's an amazing clip of me giving you a hug afterwards, actually.
I tell you what, I was really angry at some grass in a field on the last 10K for being about knee height. When I was just like, I've run on some gravel the whole way, just getting through it. I'll just keep going. And he's like, oh my gosh, I've got to run through a field of barley.
But I mean, he's talking about what's essentially a very well manicured golf course. But other than that,
all right, let it go. No, it was absolutely phenomenal. It felt amazing to be back running, just to get round, just to hit the times. And, I always said, the aim was to get round and stay in no pain and train to be in no pain at all times. And that's what I did. So really exciting.
Yeah. And it's a really good, I'm training for something I've never done before. You're trying to get back to something you have done before, but you've been on this real kind of injury journey. And then Mo has been chasing personal bests. So he's fresh from Copenhagen half marathon. So how are you feeling?
I feel like it's training for something I've never done before because of the pace that I was trying to go at.
Yeah.
But honestly, well done. It's incredible that you managed to do that 10K.
Thanks, man.
And 20 miles is coming around the corner, and that is very scary. So
what for me?
Yeah.
Thanks. That's not the kind of pep talk I wanted, Mo.
Sorry, but I have no doubt in my mind that you'll be able to complete it.
Thanks. That's not what you're saying off mic. You've got absolutely no faith in me at all.
No, Copenhagen was incredible, an incredible experience, and genuinely one of the hardest challenges I've set myself on the back of the sub 3 marathon is to do an 80-minute half. I only gave myself 80 days to do it, just because it had a nice ring to it.
80 days to go sub 80, right?
80
So that's
days,
the time that you'd set yourself. So sub 1 hour 20, which is not messing about. And for anyone listening, hopefully they've seen it, but there's an incredible video on the running channel of Mo taking on his sub 3 hour marathon attempt early this year,
including one of the best final scenes of a running channel video I think I've ever watched.
Yeah, I feel like that's Netflix documentary level of
really is.
Emotion and editing and stuff.
The editors really did it.
Hey, Mo, the 80 days thing, this is just harking me back here. Andy's going to help me out because he's a geek. Phileas Fogg, was it, around the world in 80 days?
Yes, it was. Around the world in 80 days.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But you decided to go with that theme.
Yeah, not
train
quite
for
as
it in 80
impressive
days.
as going around the world, but I only done a 21.1 kilometer. But it was.
But take it on from start to finish, training wise, 80 days.
Training wise, 80 days. Yeah. So I just got back off the trip I was in Chamonix doing a 10K there, which was beautiful.
Hilly,
New Forest. Yeah. But very hilly, very nice. And then I was just like, I have 80 days left. And I was like, what kind of target can I set myself in 80 days?
I see.
Yeah, and you're starting at, and that's a good training block anyway, because it's more than 10 weeks.
Yeah.
But also you were starting from a really good base.
Oh, for sure.
Obviously post the marathon. So the aim of this episode is to do a bit of a deep dive into your experience in Copenhagen. So debrief on that, and also maybe just a few tips that we hope are applicable to anyone. Doesn't matter whether you're running a first half marathon or you're trying to run a brand new PB, regardless of what that time might be, then, I'm sure there's something in this for everybody. So I just say, let's get stuck in and find out a little bit more about how Copenhagen went for you.
Wicked. All right.
Yeah. So let's go. You got there. Let's cut straight to the start line. How are you feeling?
Okay, straight to the start line. It was very, very hot on the day, and it was 11:15 start.
How hot?
It was 22 degrees. Which for me,
mate, New Forest was 27.
Which tropical climes in the UK.
Yeah. For me, obviously, I've never raced in that kind of condition. It's normally in the teens of degrees or.
Yeah, and 11:15 is late as well, right? For a half.
11:15 was a late start. The fact that I was in a different country, I didn't get to prep my meal the night before. We all went out for dinner, which was great. But I'm very particular. If you watch the sub 3 video, you can see me weighing out my porridge with my
it's part of your routine.
It's part of my routine.
Nice thing. But then it's difficult if that's then falls out of your control, did that throw you off?
Yeah, precisely. So when I got there, it was like I knew I wasn't going to be able to control exactly what I was eating to like the gram, which is absolutely fine. Like I was like, if I don't get it, like what can I do? How can I still make the best of this? So got there, had my cereal as you do, had like carb loaded as much as I could. Copenhagen is very expensive, so it's a very expensive city.
So why didn't you carb load? Oh, it's just
afford it.
the price per kilogram of carbohydrate it's priced me out.
But so we got to the start line 11:15. I had eaten like 3 hours prior, so I felt like I was in a good place.
Yeah.
And it was just so like packed. So many people there.
Yeah. Do you know how many people run that race? Because it's a big race.
Like 26 or 27,000.
Okay, that's a lot.
Well, that's a lot
which
for
is
a half.
quite a lot. And to be fair, the most like 1:10 finishers I've ever seen in a race for a half marathon. Which
so it's fast. So
very fast course.
The quality of the athletes involved is really impressive. Yeah.
But I found myself. So when you look at other people's bibs, you can see what wave they're in, and I found myself amongst people running 1:40s, 2 hours in my wave, which was very interesting. So I was trying to weave and get in front of them. Granted, I did arrive a little bit late. But I was trying to get to the front of the queue, and then it was just like gridlock. So we've to accept it.
Joked about this on the podcast, but this is the one thing I'm not really prepared for at like a mass participation race, is that I did have that luxury as a pro athlete. Like you literally just line up on the front of the start line. And you have special access to get there, and you could literally plan your warm up to the minute. And then be like, right, I'm going to go and stand on the start line.
Welcome to the pleb world.
Us normies, this is what we have to deal with.
It's quite a lot to deal with, isn't it? Because you've got to join a wave, and then that wave will have quite a large contingent of different time goals in it.
You know what, Andy? You've just said something really interesting. Not that you don't normally say things that are really interesting, but in fact, one of my favourite comments last week on the podcast was, I've watched Andy Baddeley run for years. Who knew he was actually quite funny?
Is that from you?
Yeah, it was. Rick from North London.
Rick's mum.
But when you set yourself up for a race, Mo, so you have to put down what time you think you're going to run it in.
Yeah.
Now, most people, when they write that down, and Andy, you've obviously got to do this for Valencia, what time you think you're going to run, because that's how they set up the race organisers and put you into the specific wave. So the rave into the rave, so the rave goes smoothly. But actually, people just see that, and it's so blasé. They just go, "Oh, I'll do it in about that."
Yeah,
I think people put such little thought into that. Right. So, and actually, it gets to the day, and you go, "Oh my god, I've got a red tick on me. What does that mean? You've got a yellow tick on you. You're faster than me. Hang on, why is red behind yellow or yellow's behind green?" I think people need to think a little bit more when they go, "Oh, what time should I do my 10K?" And, I'll do it in about an hour and 10. And you get to the start, and you are just weaving for the first 20 minutes to get back actually where your proper fitness is.
I wonder whether it goes which way it goes. Whether people are like blasé about it and they put down, "I'm going to run." Let's say it's a half marathon. They're like, "Oh, I put down, I'm going to run 2 hours," but they're actually easily going to run an hour 45.
Yeah.
Or whether it's the other way. Like definitely when I was.
I see. So you think people play it down?
That maybe I genuinely. This would be a really interesting poll, wouldn't it? But like when I was competing, there's a level below the kind of elite fields, I guess, in the UK called the British Milers Club, and that's how I still used to run in these races all the way through my career. But that's how you started as a teenager, whatever. And so you would have to do exactly that. You'd have to put down your target time, but everyone was lying. Everyone, because you wanted to be in the fastest race. So there was like A, B, C, D, E, F race for the 1500 meters.
So everyone was hyping.
Yeah. So you'd be like, how much will they believe? Because back then when I was running, there wasn't, the extent of internet race results as there is now. You had to literally get Athletics Weekly and scroll through the pages.
Yeah, the 1890s were difficult.
yes, exactly. I had to wait for a telegram. No, they and so you just. Now I think they'd seed it based on recent results, so you wouldn't be able to tell you like I'm going to run 10 seconds faster than I've ever run before. But back then, like when I was running, that's what people were doing. So you'd be like, you'd have to put down a time that was so much quicker than you could actually run just to get into a. So I wonder whether people.
You were your own hype man essentially.
Yes,
I think there are certain races that ask you to put in your previous PB with like proof now.
Yeah.
So you can't go into the faster waves if you're not roughly around that pace, which is quite interesting. But again, no one was checking any of the waves as we got there, and because there was so many people, it was virtually impossible. And it was like it was a rolling start, so it was like everyone could have just jumped in the first wave if they wanted to.
Yeah.
So it did, like you said, it takes about 20 minutes, but it took me, if I was to like go through my splits, it took me a good 10K to be able to actually open up my legs and get to my half marathon
So
pace,
literally half of the race.
which is half the race. So I actually ended up running the second half of the race quicker than my half marathon pace.
Yeah.
Just to make up time. And by then I was already like a distance behind. So every time my watch would go off on a kilometer,
Yeah.
I'd run an extra like minute or two and then see the kilometer mark. And like you say, kilometers, you do feel faster because you're seeing them more regularly, but there was mileage there was signage every kilometer to let you know. So it was like, you couldn't ignore where you were at. I like to.
So you knew where you were at, even though your watch was telling you something different.
Exactly.
And then that's quite disconcerting,
Yeah.
isn't it?
And then for me, I had to like do mental maths on the fly, and I'm not good at maths. So it was like trying to figure out, by the time I got there, can I actually make it or not?
Yeah.
It was like at the halfway point, it was just, I had no idea.
So did that sort of throw your game plan out of the window, and you're almost just focusing on that frustration whilst running rather than just being in your flow?
Yeah. So I did get quite frustrated early on, just because I couldn't like get to the pace that I needed to get to. And I knew it wasn't because of the ability in my legs to get there. It was, I just couldn't find my way around, and I kept weaving. And then like, cause the plan was to run the first 5K slow, and then, pick it up. That was the game plan. And by 10K, I still hadn't gone into, like,
you hadn't been able to pick it up, right?
And I was just thinking, what's Andy going to say? Andy Hovdale? What's Andy going to say?
Coach as well,
I've been ignoring the plan because I knew he was tracking me. And then it was just like, I have to do something now.
Yeah.
And I found myself, speeding up around 10K in. But it was like, because it was such a hot race, people were dropping like flies. I've never seen so many people passed out.
So whilst it's frustrating, maybe do you think you sort of saved yourself by like being forced to go slower at the beginning?
I definitely think so. And I said to myself, like, mid-race, I was like, this is supposed to be fun. Like, ultimately, for me, I run for joy. I'm not breaking any records. I'm not, I'm not going to get a gold. I'm going to end like 14,000th place in this race. Like, it is, there is no first, second, or third.
I bet you weren't 14,000th.
There's no podium.
I bet you're about 14th.
I mean, I did see, no, it was... So I was like, this is supposed to be fun. I just had to remind myself that I'm supposed to enjoy this. So whether I get the time or not, you just got to liberate yourself of that.
Yeah, we've talked about that as well. Just being happy in your running and general life, like, makes you a faster runner. Like, it's just a way of, you don't always need to be comparing yourself to others or whatever. Just get out there and enjoy it. So that's actually a really nice mantra that you had, but I appreciate you also had a very clear goal. So it's kind of trying to marry those two things up.
But I do think that was one of the things that did turn around and make me run faster, which I guess is the topic of this podcast, is like how to get a faster half marathon. And the first point is be happy while you're doing it. Like, be happy while you're training, be happy while you're running, and you'll find yourself running faster.
And part of happiness is being kind to yourself. So like, I guess an interesting question that's not too much of a tangent is, how kind to yourself are you if a workout that you've planned as part of your half marathon training, that 80-day build up, doesn't go right, or if you miss it?
I think it's very dependent on how close or how far away we are from the total finish line. Like, in the first 20, 30 days, there were certain workouts that I just couldn't bring myself to do. Like, there would be like 8 times 1K, for example, and I can only do like 6 reps, and I just couldn't do the last 2. And I was like, forgive yourself, you still got 60 something days left. But then closer and closer to the final, I was like, I have to really nail in these paces. I have to really nail in. Like,
8 times 1K at what pace?
It would probably be at like 3:30 per kilometer.
Okay.
So 10K pace rather than rather than half
10K,
pace.
And then it would be so now I really have to nail in these paces, and I didn't. So I think the last 2 or 3 weeks, I didn't miss a single session, and I didn't change it or adjust it based on how I felt. I just had to get it done. But
not I guess sometimes stuff happens that's out of your control. Like, you don't get to weigh out your food, you don't get in the right wave, or maybe your training hasn't gone right. So one of the big lessons would be to just be adaptable and go with the flow and stay happy with it.
Yeah, of course. Adaptability is the most important thing when it comes to it comes to life in general, but any sort of training block, and having a coach that is also just as flexible as you. In terms of,
it doesn't beat you up for doesn't give you a hard time. Oh, why haven't you done this thing?
And obviously we were filming quite a bit during the duration of 80 days. So things I found myself doing more mileage, or I did get injured in that 80-day period where I had to take 2 weeks out completely from running. So that shrunk down my window quite a bit.
Yeah.
But again, Andy was very flexible. And
then you're able to kind of, I know I spoke to you about it, like build back up sensibly rather than like rushing back up to your previous mileage, all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Just, I guess a last question on the training is, what was your longest run?
I think it was 24 kilometers, and that was once.
Yeah. So it's over distance.
Yeah, over the distance.
Yeah.
But that was about 4 or 5 weeks out.
Yeah.
But a lot of it was nailing in the paces because I had no doubt in my mind that I'd be able to hit the distance because I've covered half and marathons before. But yeah, so 24 kilometers was my longest for a half marathon training block.
And that's a good takeaway. There is a difference between doing a half marathon the first time, where you are looking to probably complete the distance comfortably if you've only done a 10K before, in which case you probably don't need to go over distance like you've talked about. But then if you're really going for a time, you know exactly what you're doing, you're focused on paces and so on, and you have run a marathon distance before, like
go over,
then you can go over because it gives you more comfortable. You're more comfortable with both the pace and the distance. But we haven't even mentioned it. How did you do? What happened when you crossed the line, Mo? What time did you end up with? I know it's not the be all and end all, but people want to know.
Crossing the line, I crossed at 1:20:52.
1:20:52. Okay, so 52 seconds outside.
52 seconds out, which was disappointing for me, but also my watch went off at half marathon distance at 1:19:54. So in my head,
you did it, and people were in the way. So let's just call it a win.
Excuse. I ended up running a good 220 meters over, but I take.
But that was your weaving. That was your weaving.
Still like a 10-minute PB for me.
Well, that's the thing. I think you set yourself a really ambitious goal, which I would always encourage people to do. You've got to set an ambitious stretch goal, but one that you could do. Yeah. Like there's no point in going crazy and thinking that in 80 days I'm going to improve from an hour 45 to 80 minutes.
Yeah, for sure.
But like you set something with the knowledge of a coach and the running channel, and you've got so close. So does this mean you want to go and do it again?
Who knows? We'll find out. We'll see.
Of course he does.
Yeah,
of course he does.
No, of course I do. And I will be getting it both on the watch and the chip time next time.
Well, that's incredible. If anyone's got any questions that they'd like to ask Mo directly, they should email in to podcast@therunningchannel.com, or any questions you've got for us, because up next we've got news stories that we all think are interesting in the world of running this week, followed by the best bit, your questions.
So every episode, we pick a news story from the world of running to chat about. And Mo, you've got one this week. What have you got for us?
I've actually done my research this week.
With official Sarah numbers.
Doesn't. Yeah, that makes a change.
With official numbers. I was super proud of a half marathon distance, but a gentleman by the name of Johnny Davis ended up running the tube lines. I'm not too sure if you saw that.
There's an article about this on the Running Channel website, in fact. So like it's he ran
572 kilometers
in 11 days.
In
11 different lines.
Explain.
So he was running a line every single day for 11 days to raise money for the charity Calm. So the tube lines
in London.
Yeah, there's 11 different lines, right? So
I believe so. Yeah. So he'd start at the first station and end at the last station every single day for 11 days. So some distances were like 30 something kilometers a day, and some were up to 90k.
And he had the easy day was the Waterloo and City line. So he did run 3k on that day, I think. Yeah.
I was going to say the poor sod had to do the Metropolitan line one day that ends up somewhere in Hertfordshire or Buckinghamshire.
That's insane.
That is a long way out, that, isn't it? So yeah, I just think it's an amazing thing because it sounds fairly innocuous. You like the tube line, that's central London. You think those lines aren't that long. And we actually did a race on the Running Channel where I raced Sarah. She got the train on the Waterloo and City line, and I had to run above ground.
Who won?
She did on the train. She beat me, but honestly, it was the closest. It was by about 10 seconds.
That's insane.
But yeah, that was only 3k.
Yes,
500 odd k is absolutely bonkers.
It's crazy. At least he skipped all the delays. There were,
it doesn't matter about any strikes. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, that's well played. I love that. We should do that challenge on the tube again sometime.
Yeah, because there's some amazing stuff from years and years ago on YouTube, isn't there, where people will hop off the carriages, run up out of the station, try and get to the next station and down onto the same tube at the same carriage as their friends who are filming on the inside. They're amazing. We haven't done that. But
I say we pick a line each and we go for it.
Okay, shotgun the Waterloo City. Which, for any non-London dwellers, it only has, it goes from Waterloo to Bank, and that's it, I think.
Which for the majority of you people listening.
yes, exactly. Yeah. But it's basically a 2-station line, I think.
Yeah.
Between 2 points.
Yeah. Andy, what you got?
Right, mine's very different. I'm going to bring us back to my passion. We've not recently had the World Championships in athletics, but also at the end of the season there is the Diamond League, which is the biggest competition that goes on all year to celebrate the world's best athletes. The Diamond League final happened over in Eugene, in the US, and there were just some incredible distance results which we should celebrate. Not least because it's a weird time of year. I actually really struggled to run after the championships, to pick myself up after what was the big aim of that year, World's Olympics. And it's late as well. It's like September, but people ran incredibly fast, which I think was unexpected for loads of people.
How fast?
So Jakob Ingebrigtsen, the kind of young 22-year-old Norwegian superstar, fresh off actually his defeat in the 1500 meters at the World Championships, but since then he's on a bit of a mission to kind of
the Brits just beat him now.
But he ran a 3:43 mile.
Okay, punchy,
which
disgusting.
Is absolutely incredible. So I think the third fastest of all time. And what was really interesting, so that world record stands from El Garouge back in '99 in Rome. So that is a 24-year-old world record. So El Garouge still has it.
He's a wounded bear, isn't he?
But he got so close. I think he 3:43.13 is the world record, and he ran 3:43.73, so he's 0.6 of a second behind it.
Yeah.
Just watching it it's magical for me. I love that distance, but often those things are a time trial. The best person in the world following the lights or the pacemaker. But this time, Jared Naguse from actually I don't know how to say his surname properly, but from the US, he was only 0.24 of a second behind him. So ran the fourth fastest time in history, which is also exactly what happened when El Garouge set the world record back in '99. It was him and Noah Nyen from Kenya, literally diving for it on the line, more or less how close they were. So quite unusual to have that in a world record.
Especially, like you say, in the Diamond League as well, at the end of the season, post-World Championships,
when
everybody's been so hyped up for it and is knackered. Yeah, that's amazing.
And one last one, same meeting, the women's world record in the 5,000 was actually broken by 5 seconds, absolutely smashed by Tsege. She ran
5 seconds.
14 minutes dead 0.21. So she was 21 hundredths of a second off running the world record. She ran the world record. She was 21 hundredths off breaking that 14-minute barrier. So kind of is that in women's running, there hasn't been this kind of mythical, nice round number barrier like there was for the 4-minute mile and the 2-hour marathon.
There is now.
But whether that 14 minutes is it, she's only 21 hundredths. You've got to think. And that world record's come down 11 seconds in the last 3 years. So just think that's leaps and bounds for world records. It's incredible.
Yeah, you could have done it, mate. It was all in the shoes. Don't worry. It's all in the shoes.
That's all the shoes. But also, is it the greatest generation of women's distance running of all time? You've got Tsegay, Faith Kipyegon, who broke the world record for that 5K this year. Guide, who broke it in 2020. Beatrice Gibet ran inside the old world record or very close to it at the weekend. Then you've got Sifan Hassan.
You've got to say it is.
It's just incredible.
It is, isn't it?
I mean, to have them all running at the same time and exchanging medals at different distances. Hassan ran London Marathon in April and then the 1500 5K and 10K at the World Championship.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it is because it's a bit like tennis, isn't it? When you had, Federer and Nadal and Djokovic all playing at the same time. Basically,
and they raised each other's game.
And they all raised each other's game. That's the same as what you've got in this distance and women's running.
Yeah, I think it takes a great to create a great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that's the new sub 4 minute mile? Do you think a lot of people are going to start getting closer and closer to the time now? Or do you think she's going to hold that?
I mean, to clear up, I suppose sub 14 minutes in women's 5K would be significantly harder and faster than what 4 minute miles is now.
Yeah.
But it's that mental barrier. So if someone breaks it, a whole bunch of people probably will.
Yeah.
So that was the news. But now our favourite bit is answering your questions. So Rick, what have we got this week?
Right, let's kick off with your questions. Don't forget, you can email podcast@therunningchannel.com if you've got any you want Sarah or Mo or Andy to answer.
Not you. No one wants you to answer the questions.
I'm not answering anything.
Safest for everybody involved.
I'm always happy to ask questions. Alia, writing from a sweltering North Carolina in the US, where all runners are praying no one gets too mad when they run through their lawn sprinklers. I get what you're talking about. It's also the year of the trail here. So in honor of that, trail running question. My GPS is always short compared to the distance posted on trail signs and websites. So when training, I need to run 18 miles. Do I follow the distance on my watch or the one on the trail? I don't want to over or under train, but the sometimes vast differences between trail signs and GPS have me vexed. This is such an issue. I feel like this is constantly coming up now. How people are running training distances, and Mo, you've talked about it before in some races in the past that you've run, that the race distance is often so much longer than the distance that comes up in your watch.
Yeah, no, it's mentally quite challenging because you actually don't know which to train for if you're I think the safer side is to train for the longer distance and hope for the best.
Yeah, so if you're on the road and you are trying to break a PB, then you need to build in a little bit of a buffer into your like pacing strategy. Trying to pace it to the second and relying on a watch or being able to run the racing line is probably like gonna end up causing you some trouble. So you need a little bit of a buffer. But in this case, I do have some tips, I think. So the specific question: do you follow the one on the distance on your watch or the one on the trail? So I wouldn't follow. I mean, I don't know exactly how much trail signposts there are where Alia lives, but I would say that in my experience, that's the distances marked on signposts are not likely to be very accurate, and they'll be rounded up to the nearest half a mile or so.
And they might just whack it on a gate, for example.
Maybe it's a very UK approach. It's It's roughly a mile.
Roughly a mile.
Have it. Yeah, that'll do. But there is something that you can do, which is take a look at the settings on your watch. So there's something called 3D distance or 3D pace. So if you imagine trigonometry, maybe we're not going to do trigonometry.
Where are we going?
But no, if you imagine looking down on the Earth.
Here's the first from Cambridge speaking.
Brilliant. So if you're looking down on the Earth, then usually your GPS distance is just measuring literally the flat distance from point to point. So it's measuring as soon as that becomes 3D. So I'm doing this with my hands for Rick and Mo's benefit. But as soon as that becomes 3D, then the point that you're measuring from space, from GPS satellites, is the flat distance between those 2 points.
Yeah.
But the higher one point is relative to the other, then you'd actually be looking at the long side of the triangle.
Pythagoras.
Exactly. You're looking at the hypotenuse of the triangle.
And Andy, speak to someone who did drama at Aberystwyth.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start. No, but the 3D distance basically would be longer between 2 points compared to the normal GPS distance. So you can turn on a setting in your watch for GPS distance, which might make that more accurate. Also, newer watches have multiple different sets of satellites that you can set your watch to receive data from, and that can improve the accuracy as well. And then similarly, some watches ship, like literally in the box, they'll be set to save battery rather than have maximal accuracy. So turn off smart recording and turn on every second data recording.
Oh, wow.
And again, that will make things more accurate. So all of those things combined should give you the best possible chance on the trails, but probably you need to kind of have some kind of happy medium between the distances that you've measured online and then what your watch is telling you.
Nikki from the Netherlands has messaged in. She says, I'm noticing I'm getting more injuries from my slow and easy runs than I get from my tempo and interval runs. I know that my way of running changes at different speeds, but shouldn't it normally be the other way round? Any ideas about that?
Yeah, this doesn't surprise me at all. This is my experience of running. Like I'm a way more efficient runner running more quickly. And your foot contacts are shorter the faster you run. So the amount of time you spend on the ground ends up being kind of more elastic. So that can have different types of risks associated with it. The impact's slightly higher and it is a little bit more explosive. So potentially, I suppose, tendons and things like that might be under more pressure when you're running faster, so the tempos and intervals. But your way of moving mechanically is more likely to be more tightly controlled by your body when you're running a bit quicker. So yeah, faster foot contacts, a bit more neat and biomechanically sound. Whereas, yeah, I feel unnatural running slower than a certain pace. And whilst we would always advise you do a certain amount of your training, the 80-20 rule, slower in order to run faster overall, those slower runs do come with a risk if you run them too slow that they're biomechanically inefficient for you, and therefore you make your foot contacts really long. You're sort of exaggerating everything for the sake of running artificially slow.
So yeah, no, I was going to say exactly the same thing. I'm very I used to run my slow runs like very, very slow to the point where it would be quite painful on
like a shuffle
knees.
almost.
Almost like a shuffle, just because I assumed that it just had to be slow. And then I realized that I can actually, if my heart rate is within reason and I can still do my slow runs at a moderate pace, then I find that my body adapts to it a lot easier. But I think like Andy said, it's very dependent on just how drastic your body mechanics changes when you go from like a faster pace to a slower pace. And it's also like honing in on those slower paces and making sure that they don't ultimately lead to more pain at the end of the run. I was just going to ask you, Andy, what would you recommend? Is there like a specific formula you follow for a slower run compared to your faster run paces? I know you have like a list of different paces for you personally, but if you haven't got those paces nailed in, what can you do to understand your paces a bit better?
Yeah, so some people might be listening to this thinking, what are they talking about? Like we've talked about feeling one paced on the podcast before. So getting out there and doing some harder strides, so 100 meter efforts, just to kind of feel what it feels like to run faster. And that comes with risk as well, which is why doing it as relatively gentle strides over a shorter distance are a good way of introducing that. But if you're a relatively experienced runner with a much wider range of paces, then for me, my race pace was 4-minute miling, but my steady runs would have been 6.5-minute miling, and then my slower, easy runs would have started at 7.5-minute miling, and I'd have picked them up as I went through. But the best piece of advice is listen to your body. If it feels unnatural and it feels really forced, then don't fall into that trap. If you are running easy enough to have a conversation, and like Mo says, keeping your heart rate in check, then that's a pretty good gauge to go off. But don't feel like you have to run incredibly slow if that is causing you kind of injury issues.
Nicky, thanks for your question. Mo, it's been great having you.
Oh, it's been my absolute pleasure, and hopefully
Sarah's sick sometime soon.
Oh, now we're wishing illness on people. What is happening?
She's just stranded in the Italian mountainside.
So we want as many people to enjoy the Running Channel podcast as possible. We love making it, but there is no podcast without the amazing people like you listening to it. So if you like what we do and you think that some of your friends who run might benefit, they might find us funny or ridiculous or a little bit interesting.
They might.
Then they might do. Who knows? Then please just share it in any running groups that you're members of. Drop it into your WhatsApp chats. Just get as many people listening as possible, and then we can help as many runners as we can. So thanks for listening.